Hello, and we're back. So this is Kanishka again, and I am joined in the booth by Aidan Frisch.
Yes. Hey, stream.
Hey, So Aidan has come along to join us. He's got a lot to say about Modern, and I think this is going to be great. So we'll just let the players know that we're about ready to get going. So they have mulliganed. They are ready to go. So we'll pass it over.
So the matchup we're about to watch is James Wilks is on Jund versus Mikkolo Guinto on blue-white control, which is going to prove to be a really interesting, grindy match, as both of these strategies are trying to get as much information out of their opponent, use their removal spells as efficiently as possible, and get to the late game where they can utilize very powerful cards.
Okay. And we'll just quickly find out who's on the play.
Yep. So it seems that Mikkolo has mulliganed and has scryed his card to the bottom.
Okay.
But luckily, his deck has quite a lot of card advantage. He will be able to catch up from that little misstep pretty easily.
Okay. And both of these decks are sort of on the controlling side.
They definitely are. They're both quite slow, quite grindy. Jim has opened with an Inquisition of Kozilek, which is one of the many powerful targeted discard spells that his deck plays, which allows him to take a quick look at what Mikkolo is working with, get some good information. Although he doesn't have much choice here, as the only seems the free or lower card that Mikkolo has is that Wall of Omens.
Okay. Looks like the image has just frozen a bit, unfortunately. Hopefully it will.
Yeah, it seems
in a moment.
Having experienced a bit of technical difficulties, but at the moment it seems that Jim is just quickly noting down what cards. All right, we're on turn 2 now.
Okay.
So Mikkolo didn't have a turn 2 play, as that Wall of Opens was taken by the Inquisition of Kozilek. It's just making his land drops and getting along to next turn. So Jim has made the first proactive play of the game in Dark Confront, which is incredibly important and powerful for in this matchup, as a lot of this game is going to be determined by who has the right number of answers and proactive threats against their opponent, because both of them are loaded with removal spells and disruption. And Dark Confidant will allow Jim to draw an additional card every turn, and just the longer it stays in play, the more it's going to snowball.
Okay. So card advantage seems to be the name of the game.
It definitely is. Matchup. So Mikkolo losing that Wall of Omens and being a card down from the mulligans is pretty important, but he has found a detention sphere to stem the tide of Dark Confidant.
Okay.
Which definitely seems very important for him in this spot. He really needs to make sure that the game doesn't get too far away from him.
Okay. So Jim's deck can be much more proactive. I think he'd be happy to just keep both players on a low number of lands.
Certainly, yes.
And just be able to attack with his cheap creatures. While Mikkolo, I believe, needs to be hitting as many land drops as he possibly can.
Of course. Mikkolo's deck has a much higher mana curve than Jim's, where the most common cost for Jim's deck is 2. So he can deploy already a lot of his best cards. And now, as he's tapping free mana, he's deploying Liliana of the Veil, which is an exciting card. It's a powerful planeswalker that is really going to define this game if Mikkolo can't find an answer. With its +1 ability of each player discarding a card, Jim is going to be able to quickly compound the small advantage that he's gained so far of being a couple of cards up, of being able to discard the more proactive plays that Mikkolo had access to. And because Mikkolo's used his Detention Sphere to deal with that Dark Confidant, it's not necessarily going to get that Liliana of the Veil off the board quickly.
Right. So this is the challenge. How does a blue-white control deck deal with Resolve Planeswalker?
The Detention Sphere is a really good option, and he has got more copies of that in his list. So if he is able to find some of them, he will be able to deal with it. But Mikkolo's list also has quite a few reasonably sticky creatures. He has 4 copies of Kitchen Finks in his deck. And Kitchen Finks is a pretty good tool to fight Liliana, as the 3/2 body quickly pressures its loyalty, and it's very resilient to the sacrifice effect due to its persist ability.
Of course, yeah.
But Jim is adding pressure onto pressure, and it's just deployed a Tarmogoyf. The good old Lurgoyf is
Modern staple?
Modern staple. It is a defining creature in this format, and at the moment, it's going to be quite large, as there is instants, sorceries, creatures, and lands in the graveyard by my reckoning.
Yeah. So I see a lot of cards in the graveyard. Of course, Liliana works very well with that. You can strategically discard a missing card type from the graveyard to grow your Tarmogoyf.
Exactly. If you have additional copies of Liliana in your hand, you can turn them into extra power for the Goyf, or for another important 2-drop that Jim is playing, Grim Flayer, turn on Delirium.
Wow, yep. So Grim Flayer, a card from Eldritch Moon that made a splash at the World Championships.
A very powerful 2-drop, quickly becoming a 4/4. And it really does seem like Mikkolo is on the back foot here.
Yeah.
He, despite having more land drops in play, is very behind. And there is
the namesake
Grim Flayer.
Let's just pull that one up for anyone who's been missing out on what's been happening lately. Okay, there it is. It's sort of innocuous looking. 2-mana 2/2 isn't always something that modern decks want to play, but...
Definitely not. But when you have Delirium on, and surprisingly enough, that is exactly what Jim has, having discarded these cards and used his sorceries and instants proactively. It is currently a 4/4 that is going to rearrange the top cards of his library anytime it does combat damage, which will give him a major edge in the future where he won't need to be hoping for a good top deck. He'll know if it's coming.
Yep. And yeah, look at this. Mikkolo is kind of struggling here. Like, Jim's just on 3 lands, but he doesn't really need more than that.
Yeah, he's really taking advantage of the extra tempo that his lower curve deck can really leverage here. Mm-hmm. Mikkolo has a lot of powerful cards and a lot of high impact spells that he could cast, but this game is currently definitely about the pressure that Jim is exerting, both on Mikkolo's hand with Liliana and his life total with these powerful 2-drops.
Yeah. Okay, so what sort of cards might Mikkolo be able to find to...
So he needs actually quite a lot of things to dig him out of the situation. You can see that he's only on 1 card.
Yep.
He might need to find one of his Supreme Verdicts to clear this board and put himself on some extra time to find an answer to Liliana. But he's quickly running out of time. He's threatening to take 9 points of damage this turn from just these 2 attacks, as a Planeswalker has entered the graveyard from the Grim Flayer.
Wow. Okay, and... so... Jim just rearranging the top of his deck with the Grim Flayer
it seems
trigger?
like he's happy to keep all 3 of those cards, which doesn't spell well for Mikkolo.
It does not.
He's already in a bad spot, and if the next 3 cards for Jim are all quite acceptable and he's happy to draw them, he might need a little bit of help to get out of this.
Yeah, okay.
So Jim at the moment is deciding how to use his Liliana, because he has achieved 7 loyalty with that Planeswalker. He has the option to keep ticking up and making Mikkolo discard his last card, but he can also use Liliana's -6 ability, where he would be able to separate all of Mikkolo's permanents into 2 piles, and then Mikkolo would choose the pile to keep. It seems like that happened. He did use the -6, and Mikkolo chose to keep 2 of his lands and his detention sphere.
Okay, and that's enough for Mikkolo.
That's enough for Mikkolo. He was unable to find an answer with such a reduced resource base.
Yeah, okay. It's a tough one. Apologies, the camera, we are getting a bit of a delay on the camera, but hopefully that will sort of clear up before too long. Okay, so let's look at decks, huh?
Yeah, so we're going to game 2, and Mikkolo will probably want to be on the play, as
okay. He'll want to be important. Okay. So
Mikkolo's blue-white control deck is actually quite creature-laden. He has some very, very powerful threats in Dragon Lord Ojutai and Gideon Jura, who can really dominate the game if they reach play. As well as that, he can really go up the ground with his Kitchen Finks and Wall of Omens, and also gain a lot of implied value later on by flickering them with Restoration Angel. So if we do get to a late game situation, he has got a lot of power, but his power is expensive. He's going to have a lot less fluid of a
Okay.
development.
So
engine
what might he be looking to board in? Let's have a quick look at his sideboard here.
So this matchup is really very much defined by early interactions leading to a late game resolution. The person who gains dominance in the early game or disrupts their opponent so that they can't react properly has a huge advantage going forward. But since both of them have very, very powerful tools, they can take a lot of advantage. One of the tools that Mikkolo has access to is the large amount of land destruction that he's main decking.
Wow. 2
Tectonic Edge and 3 Ghost Quarters. So he might want to be bringing in this Crucible of Worlds in an attempt to really starve Jim of mana. As well as that, Wrath of God and Elspeth Sun's Champion are both really powerful tools. Elspeth, when resolved, is very difficult for Jim to deal with. The horde of 1/1s quickly overwhelms him. And
because Jim's deck is full of one for one removal.
Yeah, and with both Grimflayer and Tarmogoyf being vulnerable to Elspeth's tick down ability. Jim, on the other hand, is playing a much lower curve deck. He doesn't have those big haymakers. His curve stops at Chandra Pyromancer and Liliana's and Collein's Command. That's the top of his curve. So he needs much less to work with, and is in the parlance of who's the beatdown. He's the aggressor here. He wants to leverage his more efficient spells so that he can take advantage of this.
Okay.
So in bringing his sideboard, he is probably looking to board in the Duress and the Thoughtseize, as they're both very useful tools in disrupting Mikkolo's late game advantage. And as well as that, he might be looking for the Fulminator Mages as ways of killing the Celestial Colonnades and just being additional threats that are going to 2-for-1 Mikkolo. Because he can just play it as a Grey Ogre, a 2/2 for free, and attack until Mikkolo does something to deal with it. Then he can sacrifice to destroy a land, which gives him a lot of negotiating power in this matchup.
Okay. So I think the players are just about ready to go. Looks like they've just finished shuffling up. So we'll see. Mikkolo has, as you said, Aidan, he has chosen to play this game. So the players are drawing their 7 cards.
Mikkolo has got a reasonably high number of come into play tap lands in his deck. 4 copies of Celestial Colonnade, Prairie Stream, and often he'll be wanting to go find Hallowed Fountains with his Flooded Strands. And being on the play gives him a pretty decent spot to roll down his mana base as fast as possible and not need to immediately hold up his Spell Snare, which is an incredibly useful card in this matchup given the high number of 2-cost cards that Jim is playing.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and Jim leading with the Blackleaf Cliffs and into Inquisition of Kozilek.
Inquisition of Kozilek is definitely very powerful. So Mikkolo has actually brought in the Negate in this matchup as well to give him a little bit of extra tools to fight against the powerful Planeswalkers and the various removal spells. But on turn 1, Negate isn't going to do anything.
It's not, is it?
But this Inquisition also is in a little bit of an awkward spot, as Mikkolo has 2 copies of Snapcaster Mage. If Jim were to take either of the spells in his hand, those Snapcaster Mages will eventually be able to find them again and get that late game advantage. And taking a Snapcaster Mage is, while very, very powerful, still going to leave him with 1. So he's gone with the Path to Exile, which means that Mikkolo is going to have a difficult time removing a turn 2 threat until the 3rd turn. So Jim might be hoping to leverage some advantage there.
Yeah, so it seems Jim might be sitting on a turn 2, maybe a Tarmogoyf for a Grimflayer or something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely the sort of thing that he wants to be playing down as early as possible in this matchup.
And of course, Mick's hand basically had no way to deal with that unless he can find his 3rd land for that Detention Sphere.
Mm.
Of course, the art we just had for Inquisition of Kozilek was the recent reprinting from Conspiracy.
Jim is indeed using the
original
the
OG.
Zendikar.
Okay.
So it's Dark Confidant for Jim. And if Mikkolo is not able to remove it, and I do believe he does have the 3rd land, so that he will be able to use his Detention Sphere,
Chooses to bring down a...
Casting a Snapcaster Mage without flashing back a spell is reasonably aggressive. He wants to match some of this board development, it seems.
This is interesting. Is he transitioning into a bit of a beatdown deck here?
Possibly. Mikkolo can provide quite a lot of pressure against a removal-laden deck like Jund. He has, interestingly enough, he has chosen to not only cast his Snapcaster Mage down as a blocker by the looks of things, but he's not removing the Dark Confidant. He's holding up his mana, playing at instant speed. So he's given Jim that extra card and a little bit of life lost off that Grim Flayer reveal.
Interesting. I suspect he might be keeping that Dissension Sphere for a Liliana.
It's very possible. It's an important thing that he needs to respect, as Liliana the Veil can completely dominate the board.
Yeah, but unfortunately Thoughtseize coming down, so...
Yeah. Well, if that is the case and he's worried about Liliana, luckily enough, Mikkolo has got 2 Dissension Spheres. But this really does make his line a little bit more awkward, as he's spent no mana on his 3rd turn, and his instant speed option of removing a creature with that Path to Exile in his graveyard by flashing in Snapcaster Mage has been denied to him by that Thoughtseize.
Yep.
So.
Okay. There we go.
So Jim has gone to fetch a basic forest out of his deck with his Verdant Catacombs, meaning that unlike Mikkolo, who had his turn 3 a little bit anemic, Jim has made 2 very, very powerful plays, casting Thoughtseize to clear the way, as well as Grim Flayer to present a very powerful threat as soon as he achieves Delirium.
Yeah, which is...
He's a bit of a ways off.
Yeah,
he's only got 2 different card types in his graveyard of the required 4.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this interesting, because Jim has actually taken a lot of damage off his Dark Confidant here.
He has.
And from lands?
From lands, from Thoughtseize. He is not... Jund is not a kind deck to its caster.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of tension in that many of its most powerful cards cost you life to use, and its mana base is not seamless. So Mikkolo is going on the beatdown. He's taking advantage of Jim's lowered life total and the value of both of those creatures that Jim has in play to really bring in the beats of Snapcaster Mage.
Okay, and he's decided to use that Dissension Sphere on the Grim Flayer.
He certainly seems to be banking on this Dark Confidant to really help out his clock here, because Snapcaster Mage alone is a reasonably slow one.
That's true, yeah.
But that said, Mikkolo has been did miss his last land drop, and he might just be looking for this as a proper path to victory, if possible. So,
of course, Jim is taking damage to his life total, but in this matchup, it is certainly not his that matters the most.
No. Mikkolo has a reasonably difficult time applying sudden pressure. 3 copies of Restoration Angel are a pretty decent way of suddenly reframing the importance of Jim's life total, but most of the time, the amount of damage that Mikkolo can do is really face up.
Okay.
So a Terminator's cast on Snapcaster Mage, followed by a Grim Flayer.
Okay, so what does it mean that Jim cast it there? Is he just trying to clear the way to make sure his creatures can get through?
It's certainly quite significant that the Snapcaster Mage represents a blocker and currently trades with the Grim Flayer, but I'm sure that Jim doesn't want to be taking those chip hits of 2 every turn, given that his Dark Confidant is in play. He has to be conscious of that. Okay,
and he is just 1 card type away, I believe, from Delirium.
Yeah, instant sorcery and land are all in the graveyard. And this Grim Flayer, if it does connect, will probably, that's the end of Grim Flayer. Supreme Verdict cast by Mikkolo.
Okay, well, it's a pretty good stabilizing play.
It definitely is. The board is empty for both players, but Jim has the initiative to, and he's drawn a couple of extra cards off that Dark Confidant, which gives him a decent advantage.
Yeah.
But by the looks of things, his hand isn't great for this matchup. He has he had 2 lands in hand, and looks like another Terminate.
Okay.
So despite all that card draw, that Supreme Verdict was very, very timely.
Yep. Okay, and I believe Mick is still sitting on a negate.
Yeah, he has both a negate and Detention Sphere in hand, so he is reasonably well set up to
deal with whatever threats you might put
down. Yeah. And he can, and he definitely seems like the favorite once we start getting to these high amounts of mana.
Right.
Mikkolo has a Sphinx's Revelation in his deck, which is an incredibly powerful card from Standard's past, and if he is to cast it in this matchup, he could get an inexorable advantage.
Yep, this card did see a lot of play back in Ravnica Standard. Return to Ravnica, sorry.
Hopefully the stream will come back soon,
Yep.
so we can see what's going on.
Okay, apologies about this. It's a few technical hiccups as we get the stream up and running. Okay, and we're back.
We're back.
Scavenging Ooze.
Yeah, so Scavenging Ooze has come down for Jim, which represents quite a dangerous threat if left unchecked, as there are quite a few creatures in the graveyard. He's looking at turning this into a 7/7 if he wants to, by eating both of Mikkolo's Snapcaster Mages and his own creatures. Although, of course, that's something that he can do at instant speed and is not something that's demanded of him at any time.
Okay. And the Snapcasters are the first targets taken by the Ooze.
Both gone. So Ooze is now at 4/4, which is a fairly substantial clock. And he's also even growing it further by eating the Grim Flayer out of his graveyard.
Right, before damage, okay.
Yeah, so swinging for 5. That Scavenging Ooze, if unopposed, does represent the end of the game in 4 turns.
Yep.
And has also given Jim a bit of an extra life buffer by every creature that Scavenging Ooze devours gives Jim an extra life.
Okay,
Jim
and
is following
the Fulminator Mage. There's the card that you talked about as well.
Yeah, it's in this spot. It seems very likely that Jim's just going to leave that guy in play for as long as possible and just keep on attacking, because eventually Mikkolo's going to have to do something to deal with it. And once he does, Jim can just respond by destroying one of Mikkolo's lands.
Okay.
But it does seem for now that he is going to get rid of that Scavenging Ooze before it really takes over.
And of course, getting rid of those spells from Mikkolo's graveyard, relevant here because of Snapcaster Mage.
Unbeknownst to Jim, both of Mikkolo's Snapcaster Mages have been used, but it's a pretty strong assumption that there are more in the deck. So getting rid of those when it costs Jim very little to do is a pretty heads-up play.
Yep.
So another Tarmogoyf down. Jim is really piling on this pressure, and Mikkolo is not presenting much in return. Although he does have that negate still in hand, and what looks to be a Restoration Angel, so he can ambush a Fulminator Mage.
Yep.
It doesn't work out super well for him because he still loses the land, but he does still save that life.
Yep. Of course, that Tarmogoyf is looking fairly large right now.
Yeah, by my reckoning, it's a 4/4 at the moment, so Restoration Angel is not going to be able to rumble.
Okay, and there it is.
There is the Angel. Nothing to flicker, so he can't get any advantage out of its come into play ability. But at this stage, Mikkolo really is looking to stabilize this board, find some of his big haymaker cards. Gideon Jura's, more removal spells, more card draw.
Okay, and Jim is electing, I think, to destroy a land here.
It certainly seems like that's the case. He has taken out Mikkolo's Ghost Quarter.
Okay.
Which will clear the way for any of Jim's Raging Ravines. But again and again, more and more powerful 2-drops. He is deployed another Dark Confidant, which, even with the Restoration Angel in play, Mikkolo is not really favored in this race. He has to do 11 damage before Jim takes him out in 2 turns if he doesn't find an answer.
Yeah.
So he might just need to leave that Restoration Angel back to block unless he can find some extra removal or extra blockers.
And unsure if Mikkolo choosing to attack there.
Yeah.
It's a very aggressive line.
But there's the Kitchen Finks, which really gives him a lot of time That Kitchen Finks sort of locks Dark Confidant out of attacking, because Mikkolo would get a pretty good trade out of it. And even if it's just Tarmogoyf, the Kitchen Finks is a very good blocker with its persist ability.
Yep.
It can stand in the way of Tarmogoyf once, and then stand in the way again, just slightly smaller.
Wow, and Jim taking 3 there, revealing Liliana.
Yeah.
Which, again, Kitchen Finks is fantastic against. So of course, just a quick run over the card. It is a 3 mana, 3/2, and it gains 2 life whenever it enters and has persist.
So whenever it would die, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter. And in Kitchen Fink's case, that's going to trigger its gain 2 life ability again. So it really does help Mikkolo to have drawn that really very stellar blocker, as we're definitely in a racing situation right now.
Yeah, and of course that Liliana not looking great with the Kitchen Finks on the board.
Yeah, and it's also a fairly substantial chunk of Jim's life total. 3 damage is pretty scary when you're being attacked by a flying 3/4.
Yeah. So, does Jim have good attacks here?
Not particularly good attacks. He's not making much headway by attacking in with his Tarmogoyf, as the Kitchen Finks is just easily able to block it. Attacking with the Dark Confidant, however, might be something he's interested in. His life total is getting perilously low, and even though the excess card draw is very important for him, the life loss that it represents is pretty dangerous. And a couple of turns ago when he was on 12, probably happy to sit around and wait for better options later. But right now, when he's on 5, it's kind of a priority to get that Death Rat Charm, that Dark Confidant off the table.
Okay, so he goes for the Liliana, and of course, he also knew that Negate was in his hand.
Finally, the Negate gets cast, taking out that Liliana. Both players had perfect information of those cards. The Negate was revealed earlier, the Liliana off the Dark Confidant.
So Jim, he had a Terminate in hand, did he not? Does he still have that?
I don't believe so. He does have a Golgari Charm in his hand.
Okay.
Which is pretty interesting, as all of the modes are potentially very, very powerful, destroying one of those spheres to unlock one of his Grimflayers or his Scavenging Ooze could be incredibly powerful. Regenerating all his creatures could completely rephrase the game if Mikkolo draws a Wrath. Right. And giving -1/-1 gives him a way to
finish off that.
finish off the Dark Confidant.
So the Kitchen Finks.
Yeah.
And get rid of the Dark Confidant. Yep.
Yeah. If he's really in danger of losing the game to that Dark Confidant flip, he could get rid of it before his upkeep using that Golgari Charm.
Okay. So Mick coming in with.
Yeah, he's just swinging across with the Restoration Angel, which really puts Jim in a precarious situation. Going down to 2 when so much of his deck is 2-drops. No, he is destroying one of those detention spheres to bring back, by the looks of things, Scavenging Ooze.
It looks like Mikkolo might be responding. Oh, the stream. He had
a mana leak, very, very powerful here. And the Dark Confidant pays the greatest cost for greatness, the life of Jim.
Okay, wow.
So on to game 3 now.
Okay, and so I think that Snapcaster Mage coming down early and forcing the Dark Confidant to just sit back seems to pay off there for Mikkolo.
It seems a little bit weird, and it does sacrifice some long-term value. But correctly identifying that there was a lot of pressure on Jim's life total really gave him a very powerful line to take later by drawing into that Restoration Angel. Mm-hmm. So going back to the sideboards, I think that even though Jim didn't win the second game, the fulminator plan seems quite good for him. It lets him get pretty efficient 2-for-1s, and it's an extra threat in the matchup, which is really defined on his side by being more aggressive.
Okay, and the Golgari Charm obviously very powerful.
Exceptionally
powerful.
Detention spheres. With all those detention spheres, Golgari Charm represents both insurance against Supreme Verdict and a way to get a very powerful threat back onto the battlefield at instant speed.
Okay.
So any changes now that Jim's back on the play?
It's possible. I think that he might be slightly more incentivized to bring in even kitchen things here, as being on the play means he has more agency in deploying his threats. But it's also possible that he's happy with his 75, knows his plan is just to do a little of tuning. The Jund deck is very, very powerful, and even though there are cards that he typically uses, like Lightning Bolt and Terminate, which aren't stellar in this matchup, he probably doesn't want to take out all of them. Mikkolo does have creatures that he needs to kill.
Right. Okay.
So
it looks like players may have not made too many changes to their sideboards.
Going straight into game 3.
Yeah.
With Jim on the play, he has a bit of a disadvantage now that he's mulliganing, but his turn 1 discard spells can very strongly influence the matchup by taking a key card. As we saw in game 1, when Mikkolo's hand, the texture of it really required him to run down that Wall of Omens on turn 2 to gain a bit of defense against Jim's attackers and cantrip. And without that, he floundered and sort of didn't have much opportunity for counterplay. But with Jim having the same that option here, he could possibly remove a key option for Mikkolo. But if Mikkolo's hand is redundant enough, being down a card from the mulligan and the stronger late game punch of the blue-white control deck, the discard spells might actually be a detriment to Jim at this point. He might just want ways of gaining card advantage and applying early pressure.
Okay, so looks like an overgrown tomb.
Yeah, he's cracking his Verdant Catacombs.
Sorry. Yeah.
But he is getting an overgrown tomb with it. So we're all winners.
Okay. And there's that Inquisition once again.
Yeah. So Mikkolo actually has a fairly light hand here. He's got 4 lands, 2 1-mana spells, and a 5-drop. There's only so much that he can really do in the early turns, and with that Inquisition of Kozilek, Jim gets to decide which of those things that he's allowed to do. Spell Snare is his choice, which makes a lot of sense given how much of Jim's deck is 2-drops.
Yep.
And how much of his removal spells are 2-drops as well. It also means that if Mikkolo wants to use that Path to Exile, it's giving Jim extra mana. And getting ahead on mana in a matchup that is where Jim's abundance of tempo-positive plays compared to Mikkolo is a huge advantage.
Yeah. And it can be a bit of a catch-up with that mulligan as well. But yeah, of course, getting that just hard counter on a 2-mana spell seems like a great way to start the game for Jim.
Yeah. It also leaves Mikkolo with a bit of a choice. He's elected to play that Hallowed Fountain untapped, paying 2 life, which would have been quite a bit more powerful for him if he still had that Spell Snare. So, because now he's holding up just the Path to Exile and any 1-mana spells that he's drawn, but there's a Duress down for Jim, and he's taking a Mana Lake this time.
Okay. So electing not to play 2-drop there.
I don't think it's really electing.
He did not find a second land.
He's missed on his second land. That mulligan was punishing for him. He did put the card that he scried on the bottom.
He did, yep.
And I think that there's no card in his deck that he would have kept other than a land if he's missing. But more and more discard, yeah. He's going to shred Mikkolo's hand.
And let him keep the Path to Exile. Which
Jim would love a Path to Exile cast on one of his creatures right now.
Wow. Okay, and yeah, he's taken 15 damage, so Mick has not presented any threats yet.
But the life loss from there's the second land, but it comes into play tapped. Raging Ravine. He's still going to be a little bit behind, but at this stage,
that Path to Exile is going to help.
That Path to Exile is going to help him a lot. And Mikkolo doesn't really have much going on. His hand has been shredded with those discard spells. His big threat, Dragonlord Ojutai, is gone. His counter spells gone as well. So it's the pressure's on both of these players to really present some things. And now he has second land, Jim can start deploying.
Okay, and he's got that too. So if Mikkolo is probably going to pass this.
Very
Grim
possibly.
Flare,
Grim Flare is very threatening at the moment because its ability to rearrange top cards of Jim's library is crucial for him to pull himself back into this game. So Mikkolo's used a Supreme Verdict on this Grim Flare.
Okay.
And it's not actually too inconceivable that he would do so, because he definitely wants to get rid of that Grim Flare, and he definitely doesn't want to give Jim more land.
Yep. And it's I guess, efficient use of mana, getting as much out of his mana every turn.
Exactly.
Which lets him keep that mana up for that path to exile if he needs to in the future.
But here's the second Grim Flare.
Okay.
This turn, however, Mikkolo is going up to 6 mana. And that's enough mana to activate his Celestial Colonnades. So he can actually start attacking in with them while still leaving up his Path to Exile due to Celestial Colonnades' Vigilance.
Let's pull that up.
Although it seems that he is using his Ghost Quarter on Jim's Overgrown Tomb.
Okay.
Which isn't too much of a problem for Jim because he can still go get his basic Swamp, so he hasn't been cut off black mana.
Yep.
But it is a much lower quality land.
And he's still got 2 green sources. He's not going to need too much more than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing it does mean is that the Path to Exile in Mikkolo's hand can no longer provide Jim with the black mana to cast his Lilianas.
Wow. There's only a single swamp in his deck.
I believe so, yes.
There's 2. He's got 2 basics.
Well,
Okay, so
in that case, as you can see now, I was completely wrong, and the Path to Exile is going to fix his mana, giving him double black.
Okay. There you go. So it looks like Jim is recovering. So again, being able to strip those powerful cards out of Mikkolo's hand, in particular Dragonlord Urjitai, has meant that Jim's been able to just keep himself alive to find these lands.
He has time, he can play the lands, and obviously when someone has no lands in hand, that means they have a lot of spells.
Looks like Mikkolo flashed maybe the wrong card in there. But okay, so he's got a big 3-powered flyer on the board now.
Restoration Angels come down, and like last game, it represents a pretty fast clock if Jim doesn't have the means to deal with it. Fulminated Mage is also on the battlefield, so Jim is not without threats of his own, and its presence incredibly lowers the viability of attacking with Celestial Colonnade.
And
that is a Rest in Peace from Jim, which is...
Sorry, from Mikkolo.
From Mikkolo, which is very, very impactful to a lot of Jim's threats. As long as that's in play, Tarmogoyf can't get any bigger than an 0-1, and Grim Flare
will just always be a 2-2.
Always be a 2-2.
Okay, doesn't stop Grim Flare's ability to arrange the top of the deck.
Yeah, he can still bin cards that he's not interested in, but they'll be going to the exile zone rather than the graveyard. But the size of Jim's deck just got substantially lowered with that enchantment.
Okay, and these are the powerful sideboard cards that White does get access to in Modern.
For 1 and a white, he gets to completely obviate certain strategies. Not so much Jund, because it still has
plenty of threats to play.
Still plenty of threats, still plenty of powerful cards, but anything that's relying on the graveyard, such as the Dredge strategy or Reanimator strategy, Rest in Peace is going to get rid of it. It's not without cost. Mikkolo does have Snapcaster Mages in his deck, which now are
not doing too much.
2-1 with Flash for 2.
Okay. And Jim has put a lot of power on the board now.
Yeah, he has deployed 2 more 2-drops, both of which are reasonably anemic in the face of that Rest in Peace. But Grizzly Bear has taken down a lot of wizards in its time.
Yeah.
And Grim Flare is certainly a lot more powerful than your Garden Variety Grizzly Bear.
That is true. Of course, they don't have attacks right now, but this does make Mikkolo think about it. He might think twice about attacking.
Yeah. We're in an interesting spot where if we keep on going the way we're going, Jim is attacking for twice as much, but we're not going to be going the way we're going. We're resetting things.
Okay.
Mikkolo has just cast a Supreme Verdict. Jim does have the opportunity to use his Fulminator Mage to destroy one of Mikkolo's lands in the exchange, but we're back to board parity,
Okay.
and Jim has a Dark Confidant in hand.
Wow. And Mick just used his whole hand to deal with that board.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Well, could this Dark Confidant be enough?
It's very possible. Jim is only on 9, and as we saw last game, Dark Confidant can exact quite a toll. But it is going to draw him more cards. Maybe find him taking it on the chin there by Chandra Pyromaster.
Wow.
Is a incredibly powerful planeswalker that can really, really dominate a game, especially in this position where drawing extra cards is so powerful. But after taking that big hit, he might not want to have this Dark Confidant around for much longer.
Wow, I think that might be the actual most expensive card in Jim's deck.
It definitely is. It's the only 4. So Jim's going on the aggressive with the Dark Confidant, as is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
But Mikkolo has the Restoration Angel counter.
Wow.
Which
okay.
in some ways is not awful for Jim. After that big hit he's taken, he can't take anything that big again.
Yep.
But Dark Confidant has done a pretty good job. Found him this Chandra Pyromancer, which has a very similar role in his deck to Dark Confidant.
Okay,
it's
so-
0 ability, draws a card every turn.
Oh, sorry?
How much extra time?
Oh, sorry. I think it's fine.
1 second, guys. We're just having some tournament organizing questions. So Jim is deploying this Chandra Pyromancer, and due to its +1 ability of dealing 1 damage to Restoration Angel and to Mikkolo, he's putting it into a fairly decent spot if he wants it to survive this turn, as on 5 loyalty, it's pretty safe from this Restoration Angel.
Yeah. But Mikkolo is choosing to attack Jim instead.
He is smelling blood in the water with Jim only on 5 and going down to 1 by the looks of things, by cracking this fetch land.
Wow.
It's reasonably ambitious for Jim because without those scavenging oozes, as they've been turned off by the Rest in Peace, he has very few ways of gaining life. It could be that this Restoration Angel ends this game of Magic on the very next turn.
And what did Jim find?
A bit unclear, but he does have another bite at the apple with Chandra, as it can exile the top card of his library, and for the rest of his turn he'll be able to cast it or play it if it's a land.
Oh, it looks like he found a Liliana.
That's very, very powerful in this spot. Mikkolo does have a lot of open mana and 1 card in hand, and obviously if that card is counter magic of some sort.
Wow.
So he's just found Inquisition of Kozilek, and that represents a pretty interesting dichotomy. Does he cast it to... Yeah, it's looking like he is. He
wants to see that card.
It's an island.
Okay. Liliana's free to come down.
Yeah.
Gonna take down that Restoration Angel.
Although with an island in hand, Mikkolo can activate his Celestial Colonnade next turn.
Uh-oh.
And it's unclear if Jim has a way of stopping that with just 1 red mana available to him.
Mikkolo passed the turn.
He passed the turn.
Okay, maybe not remembering that he's got that Celestial Colonnade to
Possibly.
attack with.
So Jim found Verdant Catacombs, which is pretty bad when he's on 1 life. That card has no text until he can do a bit of gain. So Jim is arranging his mana and playing Tarmogoyf. Even though Rest in Peace is in play, it's still probably better to cast than not because he does have access to Abrupt Decays and Golgari Charms in his list to destroy that Rest in Peace in play. So Mikkolo has just conceded by the looks of things, and Jim, good guy Jim, points out the Celestial Colonnade on the battlefield.
Wow.
So a key miss for Mikkolo leads to Jim taking round 1.
Wow. Okay. So, wow. So Jim down to 1 life. of course, like these tournaments can be stressful. There's a lot of nerves that can sort of come into play. So
and under the light of the camera,
absolutely,
there's a bit understandable to maybe not be playing at the absolute sharpest.
Yeah, but anyway, well played from everyone. Mick really putting himself in a position to take that game.
Yeah, definitely. And
yeah.
Jim certainly doing what he can to make sure that when he drew his lands this game, he would be able to recover and develop his position.
Yeah. So fantastic. That was a great round one. I really enjoyed watching that match. And Aidan.
Yeah, it was good.
Thanks for the commentary. We'll be back in about 5 minutes with the next round. So we'll have details about that in a moment. So thanks for watching anyway. We'll be back very soon.